All right, last few minutes. Delegates, please, with those who have a good camera, please turn it on to our speaker. Okay, we will now begin our special speaker plenary. Esteemed Secretariat, honorable days, and delegates from all across the world. Attorney Jose Manuel or Chel Jokno is an esteemed lawyer and educator. He has been a lifelong human rights advocate, having witnessed the brutalities of martial law early in his life, when his father, the late Senator Jose W. Jokno, was imprisoned during the Marcos dictatorship without a case and without due process. Chel Jokno pursued leadership early on, serving as president of the student council in his high school, high school days at LaSalle Green Hills, for which he received the Gerardo Rojas Leadership Award. He completed his degree in philosophy at the University of Philippines, Diliman. Mr. Jokno subsequently pursued a law degree at Northern Illinois University in the United States, where he graduated magna cum laude in 1986. He returned to the Philippines in 1987 to practice law and advocate for human rights. Jokno served as the Commission of Human Rights under the Aquino and Ramos administration in the 1990s and was also a member of the Committee of Human Rights and Due Process at the Integrated Bar at the Philippines. In 2006, Jokno established the Jokno Law Center to provide legal training to government agencies such as COMELEC, the Philippine National Police, among others. In 2009, Chel Jokno became the founding dean of the De La Salle University College of Law. He is also the chairman of the Free Legal Assistance Group, or FLAG, the first and largest of lawyers in the Philippines, focused on human rights abuses. Founded also in part by the late Senator Jokno in the tumultuous years of martial law era. With FLAG, Jokno has provided free legal aid to countless victims of human rights abuses in the country. Back in 2019, he even ran for senator. Although he lost, he still continues to fight for the just cause of human rights and have been an active speaker in youth engagement, serving as one of the beacons of national engagements in our country. So without further ado, I present to you all to the esteemed Dean Attorney Chel Jokno.
Hello and good evening to all of you. I really am so happy to be with you because I really believe that you young people are the lifeblood of the world. And if there's any hope that we all have, it lies with you. I have been a young person like you in my time, and I want to share perhaps some of the things I've learned uh, fighting for human rights and fighting for our dignity, basically. And I think that it's very important that you, all young people in the world, get together, that you all get to understand how your countries are operating and what is happening as far as the things that really matter to us. You know, how do we know? How can we tell what is happening and what can we do to make changes in the world? And that's why when I saw your invitation, I was so happy that I would get to be a part of this discussion. I have a few slides that I think are I'd like to share with you. Let's see if I can share screen. Yeah. You've asked me to talk about how the youth can really make changes in the world. And if you look at our history, not just our own national histories, but the history of the world, I think you will realize that the youth have always been agents and drivers of change throughout throughout the world, our world events. And it's important that we understand that your drive, your dedication, your determination, the energy that you exude is really, I would say, something unique that really is a driver of change in the world. So let's begin by talking about how we can build our respective nations. Each of us, we all have our countries, we all love our countries, and each of our countries really has their own peculiar situation, peculiar problems. But I think there are some um, truths that really cut across national boundaries. And one of them is something that was said by a very revered Filipino hero who lived over 100 years ago, Apolinario Mabini. He was a lawyer, he was also a visionary. And he said, if we really want to build our nation, he said, we need both an internal and an external revolution. And what he was trying to say, I believe, is that real and lasting change in the outside world can only come from a lasting change within ourselves, our mindset, the way we think, the way we even judge, and the way we behave. And if we truly want to have a better nation and a better world, then it really begins inside ourselves. Another hero of the Philippines who happens also to be my father is acknowledged to be the father of human rights in the Philippines is Jose W. Diokno. And he said, building on what Mabini said, he said, to build our nation, we need not just a national consciousness, but a national conscience. And these two concepts of having a national consciousness and having a national conscience, I believe, are really the building blocks for any nation in the world that wants to be true to itself and to shine. In fact, when we think about it, what kind of national consciousness do we need? And it really, this I think would apply to all the nations in the world. We need to have a national consciousness of our history, of our struggle to form a just and humane nation. Because all the nations in the world, we all struggle for the same thing. We struggle for our basic dignity, we struggle for our basic rights, and we struggle for our basic freedoms. So when we try to talk about a national consciousness, it must include a consciousness of our history. For example, in the Philippines, before we gained our independence from from Spain, our colonial master, we fought 130 unsuccessful revolts against Spain before we finally succeeded. And that's why when you talk about Philippine history, I think you can really say that our history has been a history of struggle to form a just and humane nation against very big odds. We fought the Spanish colonial masters, and then suddenly we had to fight the American colonial masters. And despite the odds, we were able to gain our independence. We also need to have a national consciousness of the sacrifices of those who came before us. The democracy that the Philippines now enjoys is not just something that was given to us. This was built on the sacrifices of so many Filipinos who fought for us to have this democracy, to have the freedoms that we enjoy today. But aside from having a national consciousness of our history and the sacrifices of those who came before us, I think our consciousness should also be broad enough to accept the diversity that we all have and the commonality or the unity, the universal truths that cut across all of us. Because whatever nation in the world you talk about, there will always be diversity. There will be different religions, different faiths, different cultures. But if we truly want to build a nation, we must be accepting of all of this diversity. And part of the acceptance understands that we all have a universal human dignity. We all have a universal uh, principles that we abide by as human beings. But aside from that, I believe today we must have a national consciousness as well of the poor. of the marginalized in our societies who truly need our help. And in connection with that as well, we have to have a national consciousness of our endangered environment. Because it's our environment that shows how connected all of us are. While we may belong to different nations, we all are part of just one world, one biosphere. And if we don't take care of our world, then all of us are going to suffer. Aside from having a national consciousness, however, I think what is even more important is we need to have a national conscience. And that is one thing I can say in the Philippines is something that we are really looking for is to have a national conscience that reveres life, that respects and understands the basic dignity of every person, and that allows all of us to develop our talents to our full potential. We need a national conscience that is inclusive, that accepts diversity and accepts the fact that we are different and yet we're all the same in essence. We need a national conscience that really pays attention to achieving social justice, especially for the marginalized in our countries. And we need a national conscience that is based on truth. And that's why the youth, to me, you young people, can really play such a role when it comes to speaking truth to power, when it comes to being the conscience of our respective nations. Who else could be that, who could perform that role of being a national conscience? I cannot see any other except the youth who are in the best position to be that national conscience. In fact, I think we will, if you look at our recent history in all our different countries, it's really been a struggle between our leaders always have a dilemma. They have to make a choice between pursuing their own self interest or pursuing the interest of their nation. Some of us, the leaders we truly respect, the ones we look up to, the ones who later become revered in our history, they make that choice in favor of the people. And that's the kind of leader I hope that you will all become. Leaders who will put the interest of your nations ahead of yourselves, ahead of your families, ahead of any other interest, so that what will we will further is really the nation itself and not any particular person or agenda. And I truly believe that you young people are in the best position to be that national conscience that condemns whoever puts personal interests ahead of the people's interests. What can we do? What can you do as young people to build your respective nations? Well, I think number one is continue speaking your truth, continue living your truth. We all know that there are authentic lives and inauthentic lives. Those of us who choose to fight for causes larger than ourselves, those of us who choose to fight for what we truly believe is right, those of us who really hang on to our principles, I believe, are really the building blocks of a nation. And you are in the best position to be those building blocks. Get involved, participate, mobilize. I truly believe that once the world has yet to feel the power of the youth, and when you flex your muscles, when you make your voices heard, you will really do great things in the world. And of course, if you truly want to build your nations and if we want to build a world that we can all be proud of, then we should move as one and speak with one voice. There are many different things we can do to wake other people up. And to me, what's most important is they must always be peaceful, non-violent actions. These are really challenges to our creativity in terms of what we can do to make people raise their awareness, to make them understand that we need to fight for our environment, we need to fight for our freedoms, we need to fight for our basic rights. And I'm sure the creative spark is so strong among all of you young people that this comes easy to you to come up with any kind of expressions that really make people understand what we are working for and why we are fighting for the causes that we fight for. It was Margaret Mead, I believe, who said that we should never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. And she pointed out, indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. And if you really hold to this truth, then you will understand that you don't need a lot of people to make change. All you need are just a few committed individuals who truly believe in something, who truly want to see change happen in the world. And once you have that spark, things happen and things will change for the better. There's a young Filipina who said something that to me is so wise. And that's why I truly believe that you're never too young to be wise, to know the truth, to speak the truth to power, and even to lead. She said, our politicians do not deserve our loyalty, but our country does. And I wish you all in your respective nations the best. I hope that we can all get through this pandemic safe and sound, and not just get through it and survive, but really build a world that we can all be proud of. Again, I'd like to thank you for inviting me, and I hope to share that hope for the future that the holiday season brings us today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chel for that wonderful speech. In regards to that, we will now be opening this as a plenary. So delegates who has any questions to Mr. Chel would they feel free to raise your hands. Anything at all in regards to to the youths, in regards to his speech. Are there any? All right. Yeah. It seems let's get this started with an opening question. All right, I'll start first. So, Mr. Dean Chell, may for for the foreigners or for let's like for the Indians and the Indonesians, in regards to in regards to rallying the youths to in making changes for their national governments, what can you also personally advise for them?
Well, I think the advice I have is the same for the youth of all different countries. Is that let's get involved, let's mobilize, let's participate, and let's make our voices heard. It's about time that the old people like me stand up and listen. And I hope you don't get discouraged by other people of my generation who don't want to listen to you. Because I truly believe you have something to say and you have something to contribute in building our respective nations.
Thank you for that, Dean Chell. So, any other questions? Delegates, please raise your hands.
Hello, Attorney Chel. I'm the USG for Delegate Affairs of SUNMUN 2020. Good evening, and
Hello.
I hope you're doing good. I have a question. Since it's one of the most famous hashtags right now, especially from the Philippines. But I think it's also it's also happening in other countries. What can you say about the hashtag terrorism? Activism is not terrorism. Especially the youth is actually the one who's using it, trending it in every social media platforms. May I know your thoughts about that?
Well,
Thank you.
I'm very happy that that hashtag is trending because it reflects a universal truth that just because you're an activist, just because you speak up on political issues doesn't make you at all a terrorist. And to me, that's one of the saddest things that I've been seeing happen in my country, where people who really believe in something, who speak up because they truly want to see something happen, they are sincere in wanting change in the country, they're being called so many different names. They're being branded as this and that, and being made to be like they're bad people when actually all they want is to talk about the real issues that our country is facing. Yeah, one of the things that makes me sad for the youth today is the fact that you live in a world where it's so hard to separate fact from fiction, where it's so easy to push fake news as true. And in my time, because we didn't have the kind of internet that you had today, information in my time was very slow. It was much harder to push fake news. But now, with the click of a few buttons, it's so easy to make something go viral, and even if we know that it's really the product of fiction. That's why, to me, I really admire young people who are discerning, and all of you who are here, I'm sure, are the type who are discerning, who will not just accept something because they see it on the internet, but rather will really think about it and make a decision for yourselves whether this is something that I should be sharing or not. And I hope that we can continue to speak the truth to power, because it's so important in all our countries that we do that. Thank you.
Good evening, Sir Chel. I'm Luis Tavere III. I'm the Undersecretary General for Finance in this conference. So, sir, as everyone knows here in the Philippines, that you had been a former senatorial candidate from the last elections back in 2019. So, having that in mind, sir, what would you run again as a senatorial candidate in these upcoming elections? And what will be your platforms, if ever? Or is it okay, sir?
Well, let me throw the question back to you. Really, the decision to run is not something that I can make on my own. If really people want me there, then I will listen. But to me, all I want to do is to still find ways to serve my country, in whatever way I can, whether in the private sector or not. I really am committed to doing my work as a human rights defender. I've been defending human rights for the last 30 years, and I will continue to defend human rights until I die. And that's really what I want my life's work to be. Now, if it will require me to become a public servant, so be it. But I will tell you, I never really wanted to go down that route. It's just that the circumstances are such that I felt that I had no choice but to put myself up there and to see what the people will say. Thank you.
Yes, sir. We believe in you. Thank you, sir.
All right. So we have a questions from the chat box. Delegates, if you're too shy to ask Attorney Chell directly, please just go to the chat box and the secretariat will cascade it towards him. So we have here an anonymous. What do you think is the biggest challenge we must face when trying to fight for our rights, and how must we face this challenge?
Well, I think the biggest challenge we all face today is how the the very strong fake news about human rights. The myths that they've been trying to push, that human rights are not important, that we shouldn't even be talking about human rights. To me, that's the biggest challenge that we all face. And it's very sad for me, because I've been fighting for human rights for so long, to see how even the highest officials in our country can talk about human rights in that way. Because to me, it's very simple. Why are human rights important? Because human rights are what protect us from being treated like animals, or even worse than animals. Human rights are what protect us from being tortured, from being put in a dog cage, from being treated like you don't belong, from being treated like you have no dignity. That is why human rights are important. Now, why is it that many governments throughout the world are trying to denigrate human rights? It's because they don't want us to talk about the real issues. When you talk about human rights, you're talking about the real issues that every human being faces in the world. Who does not want to be treated without dignity? We all want to be treated with dignity. Even the poorest person deserves to be treated with dignity. But some governments don't want us to talk about human dignity, because they know that that is an issue that is real and that people will start to think about and act upon. So to me, we just have to keep on pushing and keep on fighting for the causes we believe in.
All right. Thank you for that, Attorney Chell. So we have other questions. Anyone here who wants to ask a question?
Yes. May I?
All right. The delegate of Qatar from the UN Commission of Narcotic Drugs. You may ask your question directly.
So, do you think that the boundary, the regional boundary between states, is now overlapping, and now youth are more aware of humanitarian crisis on the other side of the world? And what would you like to suggest to the youth of today? How we can help if there's a particular humanitarian crisis in some other part of the world? How can we contribute?
Well, I think that the more we can interact with each other across the different countries, because we have issues that we're all facing that connect us all, then the better we will be able to address these issues. Issues, for example, involving basic rights, issues involving even how human beings are treated in terms of armed conflict. These are issues that every one of us should be concerned with. And if there are people whose rights are being violated in one country, we who are part of another country can help you. We can become your voice. And the more of us who can speak for those who are victims of human rights violations, then the louder we can make ourselves heard. And I believe governments will listen when they see that we're all acting as one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else wants to ask a question?
Can I?
Yes. Miss Sofia Ferraris, delegate of Morocco. You may ask your question.
Good evening po, attorney. I would just like to ask, since recently we celebrated the Human Rights Day, and you've also mentioned that the issue about human rights is something that people all over the world face since they're avoiding to talk about and address the issue. I just want to ask, where do you get the motivation at least or the drive to address these issues even if it's considered sensitive for a lot of people and even if other people don't want to listen?
Well, part of my inspiration comes from my father because he fought for human rights at the time when it was very dangerous to even mention the word human rights. And yet, despite all of that, he really dedicated his life to pushing and promoting human rights. Part of my inspiration also comes from young people because I see how much drive and determination and dedication they have in fighting for the causes that they are espousing, which include human rights. And for me, there's really no better cause to fight for than human dignity because that is so basic to human beings. I don't think there's anyone in the entire world who will ever say that he does not want to be treated or she doesn't want to be treated with basic dignity. Thank you.
All right.
Attorney, I have a question, another one. As a student aspiring to be a lawyer in the near future, what can you give? Advice can you give us, the youth who are inspiring to be in the a lawyer, public servant? What can you give? What best advice based from your long and fruitful career? Thank you.
Well, I think first of all, you have to realize that really, as a lawyer, you only have two weapons in your arsenal. That is the written word and the spoken word. So try to improve your skills in writing and speaking. Because really, that's what you will have to rely on when you later either become a public servant or a lawyer. The other is maintain your integrity. Make sure you keep your reputation intact. That begins when you're young, and those principles should carry you on forward until you get old. If these are principles that you really abide by, then they will shape the values that you have throughout your life. And ultimately, it's a choice. You will, in our life, when you become a lawyer, for example, there will be many temptations to do something that's unethical. But in the end, it's really up to you. It's how strong your values are, and how well you can withstand those kinds of temptations. That's why, to me, having that kind of integrity, maintaining your reputation is just as important as developing your skills in speaking and in writing. Thank you.
Hello, sir. I would also like to ask a question. So I'm from India, and in Indian government, there are of course many loopholes. All the governments have that, and I have observed a lot of faults, and I try to speak up about it. But the fact being, my parents and the society generally wants to suppress about the truth, and nowadays also the youth to some extent is also trying to follow the things that have been followed for ages. So there's this one gap that comes uh, between the youth that like they are not able to connect to the society. They are not able to understand uh, the essence of helping the humans who need help and fighting for the human rights. What would you like to say about that?
Well, it is true, I think, not only in India, but in other countries where the youth are being stifled or stopped from helping. And I hope you never lose hope. Please continue to do what you believe is right, and continue to push for the causes that really you feel for in your heart, because that's the kind of change that we all need to happen. We need to see this happen. Don't ever think that you're alone, because there are many people in the world, even in this room tonight, who believe in the same things you believe and who are willing to fight for the same things that you're fighting for. It's just a question of connecting with others who have the same um, beliefs and feelings, and then moving forward. Because I truly believe that we can move forward and we can see things change for the better in our lifetime.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for that. Now we have a question from an anonymous. Since you mentioned earlier that it can be difficult to assert your thoughts and ideas to older generations, so how do you suggest we help bridge this gap and approach people in order to get our point across in a positive and respectful manner?
Well, I like what you said about in a positive and respectful manner. Perhaps coming from someone older than you, I will tell you that sometimes older people have a fixed mindset. Some of us don't like to listen. Some of us feel that you have to agree with everything that we say. But at the same time, just remember that old people have hearts too. And old people do listen, even if sometimes you don't believe that we listen. It's, I think, a question of timing to a large extent. One suggestion I have to all you young people when you're dealing with people of my age or my generation is um, never be confrontational with us, because when we end up in debates, we usually push our weight and don't accept any answers that we don't like. At the same time, if you can time it well, we do listen. And I will already tell you that people of my generation, while some of us are very hard-headed, some of us are impatient, there are also some of us who listen and who value your opinions. And I will tell you this, because I've had many friends who had problems before with their parents, but they just kept on doing what they felt was right. And after a while, the parents just realized that, okay, my son, my daughter, they're doing what they truly believe in, and I will respect and support what they're doing.
Okay, next we have another question. This is from another anonymous. This time is asking about your thoughts and feelings about the Uyghur Muslims and how the situation can be rectified. What's happening in China?
Oh yes, and it really always makes me sad when I see um, people's being um, the rights of peoples being trampled on. And I truly hope, and to me, this applies not only in China, but in all other countries in the world, that whenever we're dealing with minority population, whenever we're dealing with people who are culturally different from us, we always have to respect them as people. We always have to make sure that we value them as people and not just because they're there, that we can treat them in any way that we want. um, if we approach the problem from that mindset, I don't think there's any issue that cannot be resolved between human beings. But the moment we look at other people because they're culturally different and we give them less value as human beings, that's when problems arise. That's when we see war. That's when we see armed conflict. And I think it all begins with our understanding of basic human dignity. If we could only inculcate that in everyone, I think the world would be a much better place.
Thank you for that, attorney. Now we're open again for any questions. Anyone from any of the Indonesians? Any from the Indians? Anyone from the days or the secretariat? You may ask, or you can feel free to go with the chat. All right. I have a question for Attorney Chel. This time, I guess it's more specific to the Philippines. For 2021, what are your expectations for the Philippine government, considering how much has happened, especially the media shutdown, the constant quarantine, and the rise of COVID cases? What are your thoughts about it? Expectations?
Well, I have hopes that the government will do a better job managing the pandemic in 2021. They've had a lot of time now to deal with it. I think they have a better handle on the situation now. But I do hope that they change their approach, which has been very heavy handed, and make it into a more nurturing type of approach where they accept that people, Filipinos, do follow and that we do understand what the problem is. And we will cooperate as long as we understand the situation. One thing that we've seen in the last year, ever since the lockdown began, the Philippines has experienced one of the longest and one of the strictest lockdowns in the world. But we haven't got much to show for it. And even in terms of the number of COVID cases, despite the fact that we had such a strict lockdown, we have not been able to manage the number of cases in the country. Part of the reason is because we have not taken an evidence based approach to solving the problem. I do hope that the government will begin to adopt a more scientific, a more evidence based approach so that it will really be a problem rather than causing more problems.
Okay, sir, there's a question coming from UNHCR Mexico.
Good
Go ahead,
evening,
delegate.
good evening, sir. I really admire your passion in protecting human rights in the Philippines. You are a beacon of hope for youths when it comes to amplifying the marginalized people's voices. My question would be, how hard yet fulfilling is the everyday life of a human rights lawyer?
Oh, it's very fulfilling. You, it's you get a lot of joy and satisfaction just from helping people. It's a different kind of satisfaction that you would associate with being a lawyer, because usually when a lawyer succeeds, it's because he makes a lot of money. But being a human rights lawyer to me is really something else, because it allows you to to really understand what the real problems of people are, and it gives you an opportunity to try to help on a level that people really feel. And I will never tire of fighting for the basic rights of people, because to me, when you talk about justice, when you talk about empowerment, that's really what it's all about. I mean, that's what we live for. They say that there are four basic needs of every human being. Of course, we all need food, we all need jobs, but we also need freedom and we also need justice. And it's these two elements that I think are so lacking in many of our countries. That spirit of freedom, and more, even more, that sense of justice that is so elusive in many of our countries. Because I think some of our leaders don't want us to have justice, and that's why we have to keep fighting for it.
Th- Thank you for that, Attorney Chell. Now we have another anonymous. This time in regards to drugs. What do you have? So for Attorney Chell, what do you have to say about the MENA region in the drug route? Basically, the bulks and what's happening in Eastern Europe, where there's so much organized crime happening there, and when so many people are being forced into that kind of life, the drug.
Yes, it's very sad, and I think if all the countries in the world really want to address the issue of drugs, we all have to work together. We all have to understand that the issue of drugs is not a domestic problem; it is an international problem, which requires an international solution. If So far the countries in the world have all employed very different approaches to drugs. Some of them have been very progressive about it. They understand that drugs on some level is really a health problem, except for when you talk about the drug trade, then that is a criminal problem. So if only all the countries in the world, like the Philippines and others, would realize that if we want to stop the international drug trade, then we have to work hand in hand with other countries. At the same time, if we want to address the issue of drug addiction in our respective countries, we have to look at it as a health problem rather than a criminal law problem. And um, I do hope that more and more countries will adopt that approach in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Attorney Chell. In regards to it being a health problem, so your stance would be rehab for drugs to be legalized, especially like in the Philippines or even in very drug rich areas. So is that your stance then?
No, my stance is drug possession should be decriminalized. It should be treated as a health problem. Me, what should be criminalized is drug, the selling of drugs, the bringing in drugs from abroad, all of that. That must be treated as international, and action must be taken accordingly. But for the people who get involved in these, I think the, even the data, the statistics will show that the countries that treat it as a health problem have been able to manage it much better than the countries that treat it as a criminal problem.
All right, thank you for that. So, Attorney Chow, we have another question from another delegate. This delegate is asking, what is your stance in regards to death penalty, even when it comes to the most progressive countries that has uh, that has very low margin of error?
But I am completely, fully, and totally opposed to the death penalty for moral and legal reasons. First, I truly believe that we our lives do not belong to us. We did not. The lives that we all have came from a higher power. You can call it God or any other name, but it is something that we cannot take away because it's something we did not create ourselves. And to me, that we have to have that basic reverence for life. I feel that very strongly, and that's why I cannot ever be in favor of the death penalty. The second reason I'm not in favor of the death penalty is because there can never be a perfect legal system. Even the best legal systems in the world have there have been wrongful convictions, even in the best legal systems. And if you have a death penalty where someone who turns out later was innocent, but once you execute them, you can never bring that life back. So to me, life is just too important for us to um, allow those kinds of mistakes to happen. I some people will say, well, what about those people who killed somebody? Shouldn't they don't they deserve to die? Well, my answer to that is this: when someone commits a crime, that person deserves to be punished to the fullest extent of the law. To me, that requires that if you commit a heinous crime, you go to jail for life. That's fine. But I don't think any of us have the right to take another person's life deliberately, like in the form of a lethal injection or typical type of execution that we have today in the death penalty states.
All right. Thank you for that, Attorney Chell. Now we're still open. The plenary is still open. Any delegates want to raise their hands? Any delegate at all? I saw somebody who tried to raise their hand briefly. If not, you can go for the chat. Okay. So we have one from an anonymous again in a chat. This time it's asking about in regards to voting, especially for the minors. How can they help with in regards to their elections if they are not able to vote? For these youths in particular.
Even if you cannot vote, I think you can get involved in voter education. I think you can help other people become aware of why voting is so important, why they have to register, and why they should vote wisely. You're never too young to be a wise and educated voter and to educate others. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Attorney Chell. So we're opening again for other questions. Any others? All right. In regards to voting. Oh, the delegate of Bahrain. Delegate of Bahrain, what is your question?
My question was in regards, respected sir. My question was in regards to the statement you gave regarding drugs, right? My question was that what about states which have drugs ingrained into tradition? How do you actually go about that? If we regard drugs as a health issue, we cannot still overcome tradition because cultural sects still form strong ties in actions that a particular society takes.
Well, of course, I think you would have to respect the culture in every society and how that translates into their particular laws. And if their laws do allow that kind of use, then I wouldn't really have a problem with that. To me, the biggest issue that that the world is facing today comes from what in the Philippines we call shabu or methamphetamine. That to me is something that all the countries in the world should get together and really find a way to address. The other issue is the use, and I think this is more of the Western countries, is their use of prescription drugs or abuse of prescription drugs, like fentanyl and other similar kinds of drugs. That's another issue I think that we the world should be working on.
Thank you for that, delegate of Bahrain, for that good question. Oh, there's now an anonymous. Wait, wait, it's a bit long. The state of democracy in the Philippines has been deteriorating in the recent years. Do you see a downward spiral for democracy in the Philippines in the future? And are the Filipinos complicit in enabling this decline? This is coming from an Indonesian.
Well, I think we've definitely seen attacks on the democratic institutions in the Philippines in the last years. For example, we have a senator who is now in jail on charges would appear to be very flimsy. We have a Chief Justice was removed from her office as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, not on the basis of impeachment, but through a very novel way of removal, which we call co-option. We have attacks on the media, very clearly intended to silence the progressive media. You know what happened to Rappler and what happened to the one of the biggest television networks in the Philippines, ABS-CBN. These are very obvious attempts to really limit the democratic space in the Philippines. These are attempts to establish a more authoritarian type of governance than what the country is used to. But I'm very confident that we will overcome these issues and that we will, in fact, even have a more vibrant and a more much stronger democracy after all of this is done. Thank you.
All right. So we have time for one last question. Any delegate wishes to ask Attorney Chel one last question? Please raise your hand or may speak up or send it to chat. Okay. We have one last question. This time from an anonymous is how do we deal with the issue with a lot of politicians who buy voters?
But part of that, I think, has to be addressed by voter education. We have to let people understand that if they accept money for their votes, it will never be enough in exchange for the bad things that will happen to them if they allow their vote to be bought. The other issue there has to be enforcement. The our law enforcers must have to be vigilant enough to really crack down on that terrible practice of vote buying. In the Philippines, it has really become a very big issue. I understand in the last election, it was one of the worst in terms of vote buying ever. So this is something that we have to be vigilant about. And I hope that when 2022 comes around, we will have found a way to effectively address the issue of vote buying. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. So with this, we are ending our special guest plenary. As the Secretary General for this first ever Southeastern United Nexus Model United Nation, I am proud to present our special certificate for our speaker, Chel Jokno. So, Attorney Chel, can you see your certificate?
Um, Not yet.
All right, can you see it? This is our certificate in gratitude for your valuable time.
Thank
For,
you.
uh, for your outstanding contribution in imparting knowledge to the youths as a special guest speaker for the closing ceremony. We thank you for this invaluable time, and I know that for the youths from all over the world was able to learn from this, and those who are even watching you right now in both Facebook and YouTube from the live stream. So thank you again, Attorney Chel.
Thank you.
Yes. For everyone, please give Attorney Chel a big round of applause.
Thank you.
Okay. So goodbye, Attorney. Thank you so much. We can never thank you so much enough. And
Um,
hope we can see you soon again. Maybe in
Yeah.
another conference.
Happy holidays. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.
Attorney, may we ask for a picture?
Oh yes.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, yeah,
for a
yeah.
picture
You have
before
to.
you leave. Thank you very
Yeah.
much, Attorney. That was a fun discussion. Till next
Yes.
time.
Our I just want first to make sure that our USG for Delegate Affairs, Miss Mariela, has been the one in contact with your team. So this means so much to her. If we can have a picture.
Okay.
So for delegates, please turn on your camera. Also, please mute yourself. Please turn on your camera. We're gonna be having picture taking with Attorney Chel. Can some can somebody do full gala review? I don't know how. Is this everyone we can see in one picture? USG for USG for technology.